G'day Team Mike, OFT, or Old Fellas Travels for those that might be new to the OFT channel. So I did a video a couple of days back that was specific to the old fella's life and lifestyle, journey, whatever you might want to call it. And this is one of those videos. These videos might not be for everybody. I mean, I've got people that follow me probably for a bit of me touring and fishing. Not that I'm much of a fish, but I never caught much. I never really caught many fish that were worthwhile putting on camera. But the experience and the heart was there. I think probably a large volume of people, you know, might be for the prospecting and the remote stuff, but I did make that video the other day to say that, and this is because, you know, people have been asking me about this, you know, basically asked a bit more about the old fella. So now there's a little bit more interest in that area that I'm aware of, because now more and more people have been saying, oh, it'd be good if you could tell us about this, or so I figured it probably boils down to the fact that there's another side to the old fella. And I did a video about a week ago, like I said, that I spoke about, I'll be kicking this off. But what I just want to make quite clear is nothing on the channel is going to change. It's just going to be an additional series of episodes. I don't know how long that will run, but they won't fall directly under the category of old fellas travel. So every video that I generally make goes into, because you've got the video playlists, but pretty much everything goes into the playlist of old fellas travels, and then it's categorised under that into other playlists. So these videos, because they're a more specific flavour, I suppose, and I don't think they're going to be for everyone. I have given the playlist a name, but I can't remember what it is. But I've just got a bit of a dodgy camera set up here, guys, to do this recording while I'm driving. And it's moving around a little bit, but we'll deal with it. Hopefully the video is okay and the sound's okay. Regardless of what happens in life, I consider myself to have had a pretty fortunate life. I've done a lot of my life. I've done a lot of different jobs. I've lived in most states in Australia, except for NT in South Australia. You know, lived in Tasmania for a few years, and what a great place that was. So I wouldn't say I've had an easy life. I wasn't raised on a silver spoon. You know, when I was growing up, Mum and Dad weren't wealthy, but they weren't terribly bad off, but they were very prudent. So as a kid, you know, and because we lived on the outskirts of Perth, and at times I spent a lot of time down in Noangarup and out in the country, and I don't know what it was, you know, what I did in my previous life, but I've hated the city for as long as I can remember. And the city never really suited me. I was just always so uneasy in the city, but I was lucky enough that we lived on the outskirts, and enough of me as a kid to, you know, go walking across the paddocks, even when I was only about 7 years old, you know, picking mushrooms, go down and get mushrooms off the paddock. It was all sheep and such down the bottom paddocks from our place, and I'd go down there and get mushrooms and bring them back. I knew which ones to, you know, as a kid, I knew which mushrooms to pick and which mushrooms not to pick. And, you know, you're pretty country-wise as a kid, the way that I grew up. And your parents, my grandparents, but even my parents, you know, those days there was nothing to wander off when you were a young kid. You know, as long as you were home in time for dinner or to do your chores, you wouldn't be in trouble. And to be quite honest, Nana, Papa, Mum and Dad, they had no idea where we were a lot of the time. They had an understanding of what we were doing. I'll go fishing, picking mushies, or we're going down the river swimming, but we're taking a ride, you know, we'd ride 20 kilometres or more, 30 kilometres. We'd ride all, you know, half a day to get to, there's a waterfall that used to be up in the hills. It used to come down in the swell, I can't remember what it was called now, but we used to ride there, and it was a full day. So as a kid, you know, like, was very fortunate to grow up the way I did. Spent a lot of time out in the country. Noangarup, a bit of time down Dalwallinu, Ballajoo, because I had mates around there. So I was very lucky, and I was very lucky, I suppose, to have the freedom to do what I wanted to do as a kid. For some reason, I had so much trouble at school, and the way I wagged a lot of school, and by the time I got to high school, year 10, I hadn't achieved anything. I think the only subject I passed was metalwork and maybe woodwork, and I think they were called a guidance counselor in those days. Because in those last few weeks of school, I used to wag school and I'd be down the Swan River all the time. I don't know how the truant officer never ended up getting in hold of Mum and Dad. Mum and Dad Dad's passed away, but Mum even to this day doesn't know how much, I wag school. I'd get off the bus, instead of walking into school, I'd nick down the Swan River, and I'd spend the whole day down the Swan River, mucking around. I'd have, I'd hide a fishing line in me, just rolled up on a bit of, cork, as you used to in those days, in my bag. I'd go around poking around the river. It was great. Go for a swim if it was warm enough, just in me undies. Sometimes in the, in my birthday suit. Just no one around, because I'd walk right up the river where no one was. But yeah, so, and I mean, in those days, every kid, well, I suppose every kid that was on the edge of town, on the edge of the burbs or in the country, we all had Shanghais. And if I got a bit bored, you'd always find something to sit up, and you'd always find something that you could sit up and sit there for a while and, shoot at with Shanghais. I was never really one for shooting birds and that with Shanghais. I think I always must have had a bit of a soft spot for that sort of thing. I don't know exactly why. But the Swan River had played a big part in my life, to be quite honest, because me and my mates, we spent so much time there. And I've got a particular story about, because I used to go swimming in winter time, and oh boy, geez, it was cold. But even now and then, I'd have a dip in winter time. How I never ended up drowning. But I remember I had a really good mate, Jeremy Foster, great mate of mine. I've been trying to track him down since I've been back in Perth. But Jerry's a farmer's son. His grandparents lived next door, and that's how we became mates. They used to come down through the year. Oh, we were friends from as long as I can remember, and I've been trying to track him down. And it's quite hard to track people down, But anyway, we used to ride forever, and me and Jerry decided, and his brother, Robert, and Jerry we had these strangest nicknames, for each other. And I remember we used to call Jerry Two Sheds, because they had this massive hay shed, storage shed on the farm, and his father built another one, and I know we're up there one time and Two Sheds was mentioned, and somehow it became his nickname, and his brother was an absolute animal, great bloke, but a real farmer's son, and he'd stick to something, never let it go. We used to call him Bulldog. So me, Two Sheds, and Bulldog, here we are, decided we'd go for a ride, and we get down the Swan River, and I decided it's time to go for a swim. Now this is the middle of winter, and Perth gets cold in winter time, but during the day, most of the time it's not that, it's pretty good weather. So anyway, we get down there, and I decided I'm going to go for a swim. Excuse me. And Jerry's not too keen, he's going, oh, it's cold. So I'm determined. So I stripped down to the raw and run along the bit of a jetty that was down there at the river. And there used to be two jetties down the back at Guildford Primary School, down on the oval down there. I think they call it Kings Meadow. Well, it was a footy oval down there. No one seems to swim in the Swan River anymore. So I strip off into the nothing with my birthday suit, run along the jetty, dive in, I hit that water, and oh Oh, gee, she's cold. Absolutely freezing. I mean, I'm talking like hypothermia cold. But I come up and I thought, no way I'm letting my mates get out of it. I've hit the water, they're going to have to do it too. Jerry was a bit reluctant. I think he had a bit of a mindset that it was going to be cold. And myself, I didn't really realise how cold it was going to be. So here we go. I splash up out of the water. I look up there and the first thing Jerry goes is, "What's it like?" I just put my hand out and go, "Come in, mate, it's bloody beautiful." He goes, "Isn't it cold?" I said, "No, it's pretty good. It's not bad at all. Come in, mate." So it's probably a good example of why you shouldn't trust your mates all the time. And so off they stripped. Jerry's brother held back a bit. I think he still wasn't convinced. So off Jerry goes, and old Two Shed leaves the jetty and hits the water, comes up, screaming, "I can't swim! I can't swim! It's too cold! I can't swim!" And I've actually had to help him get out. He nearly drowned. So I don't know why I seem to deal with it, and I mean it was cold, but I think when we got out, I dived in and had another swim. But old Two Sheds, it wasn't this it wasn't this piece of cake, and I pretty much he might have very well drowned, and plus it was the mindset that he's thinking it's going to be warmer than what it was, and I didn't have any preconception about it. I thought, I was going to be cold, we shouldn't be too bad. Maybe that's why it was such a shock, but it was a shock to him in his body. And I can still remember, he came out of that water and the look on his face, I can't swim. And but he got him out, and I can't remember what the follow-up for that. I don't know whether he trusted me again for a while, but we were good mates. We laughed it off. So yeah, we had a lot of fun and spent a lot of time in the Swan River. And just very quickly, another story, reference Swan River, because back in those days, back in the early 60s, there was an abattoir, I think it was in Midland, but it was close to the Lena River. And they pretty much used to let the abattoir just, all this slurry and whatever it was in the drains, blood, guts, and, bits of gizzard and God knows what else, it just used to basically go into the liver. It basically used to go into the river. I think it was the Lena River, and the Lena River used to join onto the Swan River, just down, not far from that jetty, below the school at Kings Meadow there. And I don't know, what the state of affairs was with, regulations in those days, but you used to get, things washing down the river, and that Lena River was so dead, it was just full of awful weed and mud and sludge, and I think that was probably to do with all the crap and ammonias or whatever they used in the abattoir that they just used to run in the river. And I still remember swimming across the river, because we used to swim from one side over to the jetties and that on Bassendean side. And I still remember just swimming across once, and I was just doing a bit of a breaststroke, and I bumped into something, and I looked up, and it was a bloody little sheep's brain, I think it was. This bloody brain floating down the friggin' river. Oh, and she was pretty mucky in those days. I don't see many people swimming in the Swan River anymore. You couldn't find a place to put down your bloody picnic mat on the Bassendean side in summertime. And those two jetties, that's how I learned to swim. My nana taught me how to dog paddle, and that's all I knew. And I'd never swum in water out of my depth, so I wasn't really sure if I could swim or not. And my nan was sitting there with me. We were down the river on a bit of a picnic day, summertime. None of my mates were there at the time. There was bigger kids on the jetty, and I was out at the end of the jetty having a bit of a look. These older kids were muck-arsing around, and they pushing each other in the water, and one of them got pushed aside and he knocked me off the jetty, right at the end of the jetty in the deep water. And then I went, and I thought I was going to drown. And I looked up, and here's me Nan just looking at me. I'm going, Nan, Nan. And she's just giving me like a gesture, like to come here or whatever. And just left me go, and it was either sink or swim. So I started dog paddling, and that's when I realised, I can swim. I was a pretty strong swimmer. I became a really strong swimmer when I was young, and I think most kids growing up that had the opportunity to live the way that we did, where we just had a free-for-all, because we'd be gone all day. You know, sometimes Dad would give us, and this is how it was back in the day, Dad would give us 2 shillings, or 2 bob, 20 cents basically. And so this is just before 1966. And I could go down with my cousin swimming and that, because he was a bit older and he was living with us at the time. But we'd get a couple of bob each, and that was enough. We'd go up to the fish and chip shop, we'd go down swimming for the morning, then we'd get on our bikes, ride about 5k up to a little fish and chip shop that was just a corner shop deli, basically. And we get up there, and 2 bob we could buy, a pint of milk, and for 10 cents you get a bloody great feed of chips. And back then, all those crunchy bits that they'd have all these crunchy bits, was the batter that used to, come off when they cook the fish. They used to pull that out and just throw it to the side, and us kids would ask if we could have some, and he'd throw, a scoop of that in. And it'd all be wrapped up in newspaper, and then white paper, and like some white paper on the inside and newspaper on the outside, and you just pull a hole in the end of the bag and stick your hand in and eat the chips. But there was a really good feed of chips, and we'd have that in a bottle of milk for 20 cents. Even times changed. And we'd go back down the river, and we never swum for like half an hour after we'd ate, because there was always this thing, don't swim on a full stomach, We didn't know why, but we abided by the rules, because, geez, we were going to get a flogging from Mum and Dad if one of us almost drowned, because we went swimming straight after we'd had a big feed. So that was life as a young kid. It was great. So many adventures along that river, and down around that area. We never really fished much, but mind you, I don't know whether there was any fish in the river in those days. That Swan River was in a state. And it's a shame that the oval down there was a footy oval, and I played footy there as a kid. There was a big change rooms and that down there, that footy ovals, those ovals used to have in those days, toilets and a big change room, and all that's all gone. The jetties are gone. They were good jetties, but the jetties were gone. There's not even an indicator where the jetties are now. And they got these signs and fence along there, beware of edge, don't fall into that. Oh, we're pretty precious these days. None of that, when I was a kid. We were never bored. We always found something to do, but we never vandalised. I suppose probably the worst thing we did was we used to swim across the river further up in the Swan Valley there. There used to be, and I mentioned this in a previous video, we swim across a pinch of watermelon, but that's about the only thing we ever did. And we used to do the dumbest things. I remember one time me and 2 of my mates were sitting there with the Shanghais and shooting old cans, old fruit cans and that. We had them stacked up on the other side of the road, and it was close to going home time. So we had them stacked up on the other side of the road, and we were shooting them. It was a gravel road at that time. So we were picking up pebbles and little kundis, as we used to call them, and having each one of us to have a shot of the cans on the other side of the road. And for whatever reason, one of us dared the other one to eat it. to swallow a stone. And I don't know what we were thinking, but we decided we'd have a challenge, and the challenge was who could eat the biggest gundi. And I remembered I swallowed one that was pretty big, and isn't it funny, it never made you sick? You know, I never got sick from anything like that in those days, and I think that's probably half the problem now, is we're so clean these days. You know, we're so focused on keeping germs away and, you know, medical grade cleaners and that. For Pete's sake, people, you know, like, a lot of those germs in our gut, I think we need it. And I can't remember ever getting sick from swallowing those stones, and I never remember being sick within a day or something, swallowing a fly or something. There was only a couple of rules for us in those days. Back in those days, you know, you always wash your hands after you go to the toilet. That was a must. And you always wash your hands before you come to the dinner table to eat. Apart from that, pull an orange off the orange tree and peel it, and down she'd go. I suppose a bit of dirt and all. But I think that's what, you know, that's what built Constitution in those days. And I'm sure a lot of people probably say this and agree with me. So it was a great life. Every day was an adventure when we weren't at school. You know, we couldn't wait for the weekends. We'd be on our bikes, but Mum and Dad only generally knew roughly the area we were in. And we just had, as long as we were home by, I think it was 5 o'clock. As long as we were home by 5 o'clock, all was good. And you wouldn't want to be late, especially with me Nan. When I was living with me Nan and Pop, Nan was ruthless. And I've probably waffled enough about the early days. There'll be other stories to come out of it, but that was my growing up. You know, running around the paddocks, swimming in the rivers or dams, and chasing rabbits around Noangra, all walking along behind the landy and the trailer throwing melly roots in for firewood. Enough is enough. I've battered me gums and rabbited on for far too long. I'll be cutting a lot of footage out of this video, but for now, that's the old fella signing out. Whew. I've had a fortunate life. Yeah, mate. You know, it's nothing for us. Oh, geez, I'm speeding. I hope I didn't get tagged. It's only 60k. Bit of a bump. Is the camera going to fall off? And then there, for some reason, what's going on here? They're changing drivers. But for